You got your lab results back. AMH was low, FSH was high, and your doctor gave you that look, the one that already knows how this conversation is going to land, and said, your ovarian reserve is diminished. Your options are limited. You should consider moving quickly to IVF or even donor eggs. And now you're sitting with that information, replaying it, feeling like your body already cast a vote you never got to weigh in on. Maybe you went home and cried in the car before you even got out of the parking lot. Maybe you spent every night since then doing math in your head. How many eggs? How many chances do I have? How much time? Maybe you've started to wonder if wanting this at all was something naive. I want to offer you a different conversation. Low AMH and high FSH are real findings. I'm not going to tell you they don't matter, because they do, but they are markers, measurements of where your body is right now, on this day, under these conditions. What they are not is a fixed verdict carved out in stone. Because here's the question that almost never gets asked in that exam room. Why are your numbers where they are? Not just what they are, but why? And when we actually ask that question, we very often find things are absolutely addressable. Not guaranteed, but fixable. There's a real difference between those two words, and I want you to hold on to it for the next 20 minutes while we go through this video. Hi, I'm Dr. Marc Sklar, the fertility expert. Today, I want to walk you through what these numbers actually mean, what drives them, and most importantly, what can be done. This is the work I've built my practice around for over 24 years, and my only agenda here is for you to leave this video more informed and a little less alone with this diagnosis than you were 5 minutes ago. Before we get into it, I want to share my free egg quality guide with you. Go to the link below to grab it, or just comment the word guide below and I'll send it to you. It's essential reading if you're heading into any fertility treatment, and it pairs directly with everything I'm about to cover. It's free, and I promise it will change the way you think about your next step. Grab it in the description below. All right, let's get into it. Let's start with what these two numbers are actually telling you, because almost nobody explains this clearly, and I think that's where a lot of fear comes from. AMH, anti-Müllerian hormone, is produced by the small follicles in your ovaries. More follicle recruited, more AMH produced. So AMH functions as a proxy for how many follicles you currently have available. But here's what AMH does not tell you. It does not tell you the quality of those eggs. It does not tell you why your reserve is where it is. And it does not, on its own, tell you whether the number is stable or actively changing. AMH also fluctuates more than most doctors acknowledge in the exam room conversation. It can shift with stress, with vitamin D deficiency, with inflammation, with thyroid dysfunction, with oral contraceptive use, with IVF cycles. I have personally watched AMH improve meaningfully once we addressed what was suppressing it. Not in every single case, I won't promise you that, but in enough cases that treating it as a permanently fixed number is not good medicine. It's convenient medicine. Now FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. It works differently. It's your brain signal to your ovaries telling them to recruit and grow a follicle this specific cycle. Think of it like a volume knob between your brain and your ovaries. When your ovaries respond easily, your brain doesn't need to turn the volume up much. When the ovaries are struggling to respond, your brain compensates by turning that volume up. And that's what shows up on your labs as elevated FSH. So low AMH and high FSH are often telling you the same underlying story from two different angles. But the question that actually matters, the one we're going to spend the rest of the video on, is why? Is the ovarian response limited purely by biology and age, something we truly can't change, or is it being suppressed by something systematic, something addressable that nobody has looked at yet? In my experience, it's far more often the second one than most patients are ever told. The first driver I look at, and arguably the most fundamental one, is mitochondrial dysfunction inside the egg itself. Your eggs require an enormous amount of energy to do their job. Meiosis, the precise chromosomal division an egg has to complete correctly to become a viable embryo. And it's one of the most energy-demanding processes in human biology. That energy comes from the mitochondria packed inside each egg. When mitochondrial function is compromised by oxidative stress or by poor nutrition, by age-related decline, by environmental toxin exposure, many other things as well, the egg simply doesn't have the energy reserve to complete that division cleanly. That's a direct pathway to chromosomal errors, to embryos that arrest before becoming a blastocyst, and to cycles where the numbers on paper looked fine, but the outcome didn't follow. This is also, encouragingly, one of the most addressable drivers on the entire list. CoQ10 at a therapeutic dose, NAC, alpha-lipoic acid, and targeted antioxidants all have real clinical evidence behind them for supporting mitochondrial function in exactly this context. This is directly why I formulated Rejuva eggs. CoQ10 combined with NAC, ALA, NMN, and key antioxidants built specifically to target the mitochondrial and oxidative stress drivers behind diminished ovarian reserve. If your AMH is low and your FSH is high, supporting egg quality at the mitochondrial level is the foundation everything else gets built on. If you're sitting there thinking, nobody has ever talked to me about my mitochondria, that's exactly the kind of gap a real fertility assessment closes. The second driver is nutrient deficiencies. The most common one I see by a wide margin is vitamin D. Vitamin D receptors are present directly in the granulosa cells surrounding your developing follicles. When vitamin D is low, follicular development is measurably impaired. The signaling those cells need to support a maturing egg simply isn't optimized. And I want to underline something here. Not deficient on a standard lab report is not the same as optimal for fertility. I regularly see women with low AMH of 0.6, FSH of 18, walking around with vitamin D in the teens, and nobody has ever connected those dots for them. DHEA is the second piece I look at in appropriate cases. And DHEA is a precursor hormone that supports the earliest stages of follicular recruitment. And research has shown that in specific women with diminished ovarian reserve, targeted DHEA supplementation supports both the number and the quality of follicles recruited in a cycle. This isn't something to self-prescribe. It needs to be dosed and monitored. But when it's used appropriately in the right patient, it matters. 2 nutrients, a blood draw, and a supplement plan, and yet in the overwhelming majority of the AMH low patient and FSH high consults that I do, neither has ever been formally checked. The third driver is chronic inflammation, and it creates a genuinely hostile environment for follicular development, even when everything else looks reasonably well on paper. Your developing follicles are bathed in follicular fluid, and that fluid directly reflects your body's broader inflammatory state. Elevated inflammatory markers like CRP and often a wider cytokine panel correlate with follicles that struggle to develop and mature normally, and with a uterine environment that's less receptive even if an embryo does form. This inflammation can come from gut dysfunction, from subclinical autoimmune activity, from chronic stress itself, or from your diet. But whatever the source, if inflammation is present and unaddressed, it is working against the very numbers you're trying to improve. This is rarely, if ever, checked as part of a standard fertility workup that is only focused on AMH and FSH, which means a huge number of women are trying to improve their ovarian reserve numbers while an active inflammatory process sits underneath it, completely unaddressed and unaware. The fourth driver is thyroid dysfunction, and I talk about this constantly because I see it missed constantly. Subclinical thyroid issues, including elevated thyroid antibodies with a completely normal TSH, measurably suppress ovarian function. TSH being in range tells you almost nothing about whether free T3, the active hormone your cells actually use, is optimized for the metabolic demands of follicular development. And antibody elevation, even without a hormonal level being abnormal, signals a broader immune activation that affects reproductive tissue well beyond just the thyroid gland itself. This is almost never checked in the specific context of why is my AMH low and my FSH high. It's treated as a separate issue entirely, when in reality, it's often part of the same picture. And the fifth driver, the one that's hardest to put a number on, but that I see in nearly every woman who's been on a long, difficult fertility journey, is chronic stress. Here's the actual mechanism, because I don't want this to sound like just relax. Cortisol, your primary stress hormone, directly suppresses the HPO axis, the signaling chain that runs from your hypothalamus to your pituitary to your ovaries. Chronically elevated cortisol interferes with that signal at multiple points along the chain. And if you've been trying to conceive for months or years, waking up at 3 a.m., doing the math, grieving every negative test cycle after cycle, your cortisol is very likely elevated, whether or not it's ever been measured. That stress isn't just something you're carrying around emotionally. It's actively, physiologically part of what's suppressing the exact system we're trying to support. Let me bring all 5 of these together with a real case, because this is where it stops being theory. I had a patient, 38 years old, AMH of 0.6, FSH of 18. She had been told almost word for word that she was nearly menopausal and that donor eggs were her most realistic path forward. When we ran a full root cause workup, here's what we found. Vitamin D was 18, elevated CRP, subclinical hypothyroid antibodies that had never once been checked. And she told me she'd been waking up at 3 a.m. with anxiety nearly every night for 8 months straight. We addressed all 4 of those findings directly. 6 months later, her FSH came down to 11. She got pregnant naturally. I'm not telling you that story to promise you the same outcome. I don't do that to you. And you deserve better than false promises. I'm telling you that because the story, that outcome, happened for one reason. We asked why. Nobody had asked why before. If any part of what I just described sounds like your own chart, your own 3 a.m., your own nearly menopausal conversation, that is exactly the kind of picture a real fertility assessment is built to uncover. You don't have to keep wondering alone. If you've been told your AMH is too low or your FSH is too high, I don't want you to close this video and just sit with that alone the way you have been. I want you to do one thing right now while this is fresh. Book a free fertility assessment with my team. We will look at your full picture, your labs, your history, everything that's been checked and everything that hasn't, and tell you honestly what we see and whether there is a real root cause path here worth pursuing for you. Not a sales pitch, an honest look from people who do this every single day. The link is in the description. Don't wait until after your next cycle to ask why. Ask now, while you're already thinking about it. And don't forget the free egg quality guide, also in the description below. Start there today if you want something in your hands right now. If your doctor handed you low AMH and high FSH and left the room without ever asking why, I want you to hear this. That is not the end of the conversation, or doesn't have to be. It's the beginning of the right one. The 38-year-old who was told she was nearly menopausal and got pregnant naturally once we found what was suppressing her numbers. Danielle, 13 years into her journey, holding her daughter today because she never stopped looking for the piece that was missing. These are not miracles, even if they sound like it. These are what happens again and again when someone finally asks why instead of just saying, try again. You are not your lab numbers. You are a whole person with a story behind those numbers. And that story is exactly what we're built to understand. Grab my free egg quality guide in the description and book your fertility assessment discovery call today. Let's find out together what's actually behind your numbers. I'm going to leave you with this next video that I know you're going to find super useful to keep improving your fertility. Make sure you watch it next. Until the next video, stay fertile and stay hopeful.